Good morning, and welcome to another exciting edition of Day 4 with the man, Frank SCALISH.
We are back.
Hopefully everybody had a healthy and safe 4th of July, and everyone has 5 fingers and 5 toes after the fiasco.
Yeah, exactly, dude.
Oklahoma is a state like where I think pretty much anything goes firework-wise, but I think there's some they're a little harder to get your hands on than in other states.
Yeah, I like the rules in Oklahoma, or lack thereof.
It's for a reason. I don't know if it actually qualifies as the Wild West.
It's cool. I'm trying to fix my collar. There we go.
Do you know why Oklahomans are called Sooners?
I have no idea.
It's because when they had the land rush, there was a group of people that left sooner than everyone else so they could stake their claim out.
Ah.
And that's why they're called Sooners. So, like, all the other schools around say, oh, your school's named after a cheater, but because we left before we were supposed to. But it is what it is. That's why our mascot are Boomer and Sooner, the two horses within the covered wagon. So there would be a land rush of people in covered wagons back then. But I digress.
And see, but I've got a little piece of history now that I can take with me.
Speaking of history, let's throw this up. We got a really good show for today on the eve of ICAST. So when this photo, when that photo was taken, that is a young Frank SCALISH, and I love to bring that photo in. When that photo was taken, you're plying the waters of Lake Erie.
Yes.
What was the first quote unquote finesse bait that you ever remember using to catch smallmouth on the Great Lakes?
Okay, that's really easy. It was a grub, a curly tail grub was the absolute first, and then the tube, and more so the curly tail grub. And we threw them in 2-inch, 3-inch, and 4-inch sizes, and mostly the 3-inch size.
Now, did that come along like were guys doing that before your time, or was that kind of like oh my gosh, we're throwing this finesse grub and let's keep it under our hat so all the other the anglers don't figure it out?
Right, the 2 and 3-inch grubs. We I don't know if it was around before us, but realistically, Berkeley released a power grub. I think it was 2.5 inches, way back in the day. And they had a smoke color that was astronomical. And we caught a lot of fish on that. And the trick back then, because there's always a trick, was not to throw it on a ball head, but to throw it on like a darter head.
Ooh.
So when you would drift, and you would actually keep it mid water column. You got to remember, this is way before.
If you don't mind, like what time? Just give us like a decade.
Oh,
80s?
God. Yeah, let me just think a second. I got to do some math. I was told there would be no math.
I'm not trying to date you here, but I just want to get a time frame.
I'm thinking right now.
We're in the neck of the woods where when you fired it up, you're talking 2-stroke, and you could smell the oil burning. For takeoff.
Yeah.
Right?
Every boat when they started had that cloud of
18.5 footer. It would have to have been the 80s, late 70s, early 80s.
40 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, almost 40 years ago. And so we threw grubs on them back then, and there wasn't a whole lot of people making them. We threw tubes on them, but back then, pretty much one of the only tubes you could get was the original Bobby Garland Gets It. And it was like
a lot about that.
It was like, yay big. And so we would go armed to the core with, the color was 200 green. That was the color. And they were like 2-inch or 3-inch tubes, real skinny, tiny tubes. And then 2.5-inch grubs, almost like crappie grubs, but fatter bodied, clearly. And then as time progressed, other companies like Kalen started making 4-inch and 5-inch. So we started, what I noticed, here's something crazy, and this is really pertinent. What I noticed is we started going bigger and bigger and bigger because we tried to eliminate a lot of the 2 and 3 pound bites. So we started going bigger and bigger. We started out micro and then gradually went bigger and bigger. Like literally, I remember dragging 5-inch flipping tubes out there at one point in time. And I mean, the thing was gigantic. And so now what's happening, because of the amount of fishing pressure over all these decades, okay, the amount of fishing pressure that's going reverse. It's going back to this tiny, finesse type stuff. And because you just can't trigger the bites anymore like we used to, because we used to literally, it got to the point where the bigger the bait you were throwing, the better. You wouldn't go out and catch 80 bass, but the 10 you caught were all weigh-in quality fish. You know what I'm saying? And now it's going reverse. Now it's going back to micro, which is really kind of cool. Not micro, but more finessey.
Well, I ask you that question because we have a special guest today, Frank. I like the shows with special guests. Props, trailers, buddies, kids.
It keeps it alive and moving.
It does keep it alive. So today's guest, familiar to a lot of BTL listeners from both the classic, and then we had him on last year, but he's a little bit of a mad scientist mixed with businessman, mixed with smallmouth savant. Fair assessment on your side, Frank?
Yeah, you just left out the one other thing. Obsessive over the smallmouth.
Obsessive over the smallmouth. It is Dan Miguel from Great Lakes Finesse, a company that Pradco. What are you 2 years in with Pradco now, Dan?
Just over a year.
Oh, just over a year.
Yeah, it hasn't been long.
I mean, niche, small Northeast, and then you guys have just exploded over the past year, and you're putting a lot of baits in hands that there's a lot of guys up north that are like, man, I wish this wasn't happening right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's probably very true. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I get texts.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We are on the eve of ICAST, and there's some new launches for Great Lakes Finesse. So we're going to go through some of the new baits. We're also going to talk about why, because there's putting out new baits for the sake of putting out new baits, and then there's putting out new baits to fill a need, to fill a niche based on time on the water, based on research, study, and saying, hey, we need this, and then you go back into the lab and come out with what's new. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm kind of going to turn it over to you guys to go through it. I think we all three have some of the new stuff sitting next to us that we're going to get to show. So this might be a good first look.
Oh, it's going to be a first look.
Dan, just start out, talk about, for if you haven't watched any of the previous shows, a 3-minute overview of Great Lakes Finesse, how you got involved, and how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been fishing tournaments for over 20 years now. Up here in the north, our tournaments are dominated by smallmouth. So if you're not bringing 5 big ones to the scales, you don't have a chance. There's the odd exception to that, but I would say 90 to 95% of tournaments are won on smallmouth. And so for years, my friend, close group of friends and I, we've done really, really well. We got onto this really light line micro baits strategy probably well over 10 years ago now, where we're buying like little crappie baits or cutting our baits down, making them really small. And we just found, as anglers, we're just getting on top of these fish more and more. It just seems like the smaller, the better. And so there was a while there where I was doing really well on the tournament scene. And then I had triplets. And, at that point, the thought of ever fishing on the Elite Series or anything kind of went away. And, for me, personally, I felt like I'd already accomplished a lot of what I wanted to do locally. And, I felt like there was a real opportunity to kind of share some of these secrets and share this passion and knowledge that, we had gained over the last several years doing well. And, so really, everything we do is really just to kind of fill the need. None of this stuff really existed that we felt. Finesse is always, an afterthought or a throw in for brands. They'll make a small bait and say they're finesse, and really they're just not finesse focused. So for us, it was about being a brand that was entirely finesse focused, and really, in my mind, I feel like we really created this micro finesse category, and just by default being the first to really be focused on it and providing education, we're just kind of the leaders in it now. And for us, it's just about filling gaps in the market. Something that doesn't interest me at all is, just thinking about what people will buy. It's more about, how do we catch more fish when we're out on the water? And so, yeah, we're just going to continue to bring out more baits that, we feel we need, fill certain gaps, solve problems for us. I mean, we're still hardcore tournament anglers. Fished several last year, did well in a few of those, like really well.
You have like a 48-pound bag of smallmouth or something?
No, 32 and 32.4
okay.
In the river on the St. Lawrence. Yeah, that's the record. Apparently, no one's come forward with a bigger weight. So, yeah, we're just going to continue to remain focused on that mission, and that means our mission completely revolves around making baits that'll help people win, and just by nature, it means making baits that help you catch the biggest, most pressured fish in the lake.
Right.
And,
so
that's it.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I gotta say this, because these baits aren't just big baits made little and called finesse. There's a lot of thought behind these, and there's a lot of properties that you guys figured out to make them truly stand alone. Just because someone comes out with a bait and says, "Oh, look, it's finesse. It's only 2.5 inches long or 3 inches long," that doesn't make it mean that it does the same stuff. And so that's kind of where I'm hoping we could, the details, the devil's in the details. This is kind of where I'm hoping we could go. I want to educate the people on the properties and the principles behind all these lures.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really great point, Frank. Every time we come up with a bait, we don't start with the design in mind. We actually write down all of like the challenge we're facing and all of the things that the bait needs to do that we feel will help us catch fish. And then we start designing, and, what does the profile look like? What are the attributes? What are the fine details that need to be in the bait? So yeah, it's really good point. All of these are very much focused on solving a problem that we're facing as anglers when we're trying to catch big ones.
So
go ahead, Matt.
I was just saying, at the end of June, we did a show where we were, where Frank and I talked about gaining confidence in new lures, things that you haven't thrown, and how to catch them. So I think this is like a perfect segue after that show before our 4th of July break, because there's a lot of anglers in a lot of part of the country, me included, that would like look at the snack craw and be like, "You mean a smallmouth can find that thing on the bottom?" Or they'd look up, or they'd look at the drop minnow and go like, "Dude, that thing has absolutely no action to it. Like, what's the difference with it?" But that's where I think, you get the designer, you get the Frank, you talk about expanding it. That's where I think you can really learn and put more fish in the boat from episodes like this. So.
The crazy thing about it, Matt, the snack craw.
Yeah.
Anybody that smallmouth fish experiences the regurgitation factor in your live well. And when they start spitting up crayfish, 90% of the crayfish that come out of their mouths are like that big, which is unbelievable. I used to snorkel in Lake Erie and catch crayfish for my grandfather to go fish for smallmouth with. And he wanted them a certain size. And these things, they're the exact same size as that crayfish right there. And it's unbelievable, because if you don't see it, you don't believe it. Like a largemouth will regurgitate a crayfish in your live well, and the thing will be 4 inches long. It looks like a lobster. But most of the crayfish the smallmouth are regurgitating are tiny little things. They spend their life rooting around in those rocks when they're not alewives and emerald shiners, they spend their time rooting around in the rocks, and that's almost the sizes they prefer.
Yeah. Were you nervous when you partnered with Pradco, Dan, that like the general public outside of the hardcore smallmouth guys would not understand this, would look at these baits and go, man, there's not much to them, way too small, not for me? Was that a thought in your mind? Because now, I mean, a year in, and we're going to talk about the new products that are coming out at ICAST this year. It's been a massive home run, but was there any hesitation to be like, man, we're going to bring this national, and I'm afraid people are going to look at these things and go, what the heck do I do with that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Even before we started the brand, we felt that was going to be a challenge. I mean, we felt that we were really the only ones onto this, panfish size baits for these big giant fish. And so from day one, even prior to the Pradco, we always felt like education was going to be a big component. So you'll see a lot of content from us, whether it's on our social channels, YouTube, wherever. We answer a pile of questions every day on our social media platforms to help educate people on this technique. And I really do believe we're just scratching the surface on this. And over the next several years, this is going to become in my mind, the dominant way to catch a lot of these big fish.
Yeah. Where do you guys want to go from here? Have that, like, how do we want to go about? Because I've got this awesome video that we can run, but it's kind of up to you guys on here on how we want to kind of unveil these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 new products that Great Lakes Finesse is unveiling at ICAST.
Go ahead, Frank.
Actually, I'm gonna let Dan, you pick the order, you do what you got to do. I want the people watching this show now. Are these available? These are going to be available now on Luranet.
Yeah, so they'll be available at that, like when this show goes live on the 11th. I think what would be awesome, and the big takeaway I got last time we spoke was when Matt really brought credibility by saying, you guys are like, this is the biggest thing since like the chatterbait or whatever. I really want to bring up the Juvie Craw to just reiterate the success of that product. Like we can't make those fast enough. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how that has really nationally put the brand on the map. And then kind of roll into the new stuff after that.
Okay, because the Juvie Craw was released last year.
No, I know the classic just a couple months ago.
The classic a couple months ago.
Yep.
Yeah, that's crazy, because that is exactly what we talked about 5 minutes ago. what the bass are always regurgitating.
Yeah. I think the nice thing about the Juvie Craw is it gives you just way more options, including being able to fish it deep with our heavier heads and cracking it, swimming it. But yeah, I'd love to be able to talk about that and how that bait has just kind of every dealer I speak to, whether it's Tackle Warehouse, Omnia, anybody, they're like, this is the hottest selling bait right now in North America.
Yeah, talk it up, dude.
Yeah, how are you able to reinvent? Like when we opened the show, Frank was like, well, that and the tube. But I mean, this basically reinvented the tube.
Yeah, we can talk about all that, and just opens up more applications for a finesse craw bite opportunity.
So start with that then. When am I going to want to go finesse? Like I'm headed up to Thousand Islands for 5 days of fun fishing in July after this next open. Like when am I going to want to go super finesse?
Immediately. We don't immediately. Like before the boat is in the water, like that's all you're gonna have rigged. That's how we roll.
But okay, let's go into the why then. Like why the Juvie Craw instead of a 5-inch tube like Frank drug in the 80s while he made sure to wear a bandana to cover up those luscious curls that I'm sure he had just had permed.
No, that's natural hair, dude. No product, man.
Yeah. Sorry, are we going now? I know you said
we're done. We're going. Yeah. We're rolling, Dan. Like okay, why? Sure. Why the super finesse? Like I said, Frank's was dragging 5 and 6 inch tubes. Now we're back to the 2 3/4 inch tubes.
Yeah. So right away, just the pressure. I've never seen so many boats out on the St. Lawrence. I was there for the U.S. opener a couple weeks ago, and I have never seen so many out-of-state bass boats. Every spot had 2 or 3 boats on it. We were around boats all the time. That was unheard of, 3, 4, 5 years ago. These fish, there's no fish that's safe anymore out there with forward-facing sonar. Prior to that, you could miss a lot of fish. They'd be right beside you. You wouldn't see them now. Everyone sees all of them. So, we're finding that we have to immediately just resort to the finesse stuff. We have no choice. If we're going to get bit, that's the way we got to go.
Well, quality bites.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, those are the most educated fish. They've seen the most. They've been around the block. They're not big because they're dumb. That's for
right.
sure.
And here's something crazy about it. A 5-pound smallmouth up where we live is 15 years old. So think about all the baits they've seen in 15 years.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, even before, even as early, like as recent as 2 or 3 years ago, we could get right on top of these fish in deep water and catch them right below the boat. And now we're finding that as soon as we're on top of them, they're moving away and getting out of range. So it's completely changed.
Do you think some of these smallmouth, like especially on the Great Lakes, like do they live like in that area? So like if they're there in 2017, they're still there in 2024. So they've literally seen 100, 200 baits every single year drug past them, or do you think they're more kind of pelagic, or is that impossible to answer? But I mean, have you ever gotten on a deal where you've caught like the same fish on the same rock pile, like year in and year out?
Not that I know of. I mean, I can't say that I could answer that truthfully. Okay. No, I can't. Maybe. I'm just being honest.
I didn't know. I thought that was a valid question.
You gotta be.
We've caught the same fish on the same spot, or the next day or whatever, on the same boulder, or isolated piece of structure. But year over year, I couldn't tell you. I don't know.
How long did it take to come up with that, with the design, with the production? Like, just talk about the development of that kind of juvie craw.
I mean, that took a while. There's a lot of little intricate details in that bait, and just the floating, having those floating properties and making sure that the bait doesn't blow out on a hook set, and make sure that the tentacles sit the way they need to sit. It also, you don't want the hook riding off to the side. You don't want the bait rolling. So, I mean, we went through at least 10 or so iterations of that bait before we got a design we felt comfortable with. And then we went to work on the product testing, and every single bait that we release, we test them thoroughly, meaning we're having several, like many catch days, like 50 plus fish days with a bait before we release it. Every bait that we release has a absolute minimum 1 full season of fishing before it's released.
So that's why I had heard about it, even though it hadn't been released until a couple months ago. Okay,
yeah,
that makes sense. And then, did you build that bait around the Mini Pro tube head, or how did that work? Because like I know frog wise, like a lot of times you like build frogs around the hook and things. So how was that work? Because this is also the unique tube head that goes with this.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the little Mini Pro tube head. We fish a lot of mini tubes, like that 2.2 to 2.5 size. So that hook has become extremely popular. It's a bestseller on like Tackle Warehouse and sold out everywhere all the time. So yeah, when we had the idea to build the bait, the idea to build that bait existed before we thought we were going to do it on this hook. But when we started getting into the design, it just made a lot of sense to build the juvie craw so that it fit this tube head perfectly.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you. I had the opportunity to fish that tube head, and it is a sticker. I mean, when you hook the smallmouth, you got them. The thing I like about it, the compact. There's a lot of things I like about it. The thing I like a real lot about it is how it slides over the rocks, which up here they're snaggy. And that thing slides right over them, and it keeps the hook point riding up. So over the course of fishing it, it's not turning sideways and banging into all the rocks with the hook point, and your hook point staying sharper longer. The other thing I like about it is a lot of times you're in the roof of the mouth or through the side of the cheek on the inside of the mouth, and the fish can't shake it, because on a standard tube head with the longer hook shank, the lead is flailing back and forth while the fish is jumping and fighting you, and it acts as a leverage. And a lot of times, especially with round bends, they come out. But this thing is literally plastered into the fish's mouth, and you don't have all that flailing around with the lead. So I was really impressed fishing it. And the place that I was fishing it, ordinarily I would lose 30 tube heads easily in a day, and I fished 2 of those all day. So
yeah, I mean, that's really what it was designed for, right? Less snags, better hookups, ultimately landing more fish. Yeah, it's an incredible tube jig head, and the top anglers are buying them up like crazy.
Oh yeah.
So that juvie crawl was just, you think that's the bait that has just exploded over the last couple months then for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it is unbelievable. I think the underwater footage is what really drove that. I mean, we focused a lot on that underwater footage and the development, and I think people really recognize that bait does what it should do. And I mean, people love fishing tubes and people love fishing craws, and to combine those two together just unlocks an opportunity, whether it's shallow, deep, just so many different ways to fish it. So yeah, everyone gets it right away. Yeah, it's just been unbelievable. We can't make them fast enough. That's all I can say.
So then last year, while all this was coming out, you were testing and had in the hands of your guys up around there and up north what's coming out now.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone has it. Everything has to catch them. And the thing is, not only do you need to get bites, you need to know that you can land fish. So there's baits that I've got coming out next year that we've been dialing in even last fall and this early spring. And we were getting a pile of fish to bite it, but we couldn't get them to stay on very well. So we've had to make adjustments to the bait just for that landing percentage. So yeah, everything gets fished hard.
Here's a good question for both of you. Big smallmouth, what should your, regardless of, let's just do a single hooked lure. What should your hook to land ratio be if you're doing it right, like over the course of a season? I know there's a bunch of variables, but I'm interested in both of your answers on that.
I think if you're going to be winning tournaments, and I mean winning, not top 10, you need to be probably in that 85% north of that. 90 would be a good year, meaning you're losing 1 out of 10. That's always what we strive for, and we're always dialing in our setups and baits so that we can achieve that. 98. Yeah, I mean, that would.
No, I said 90. That's.
90. Yeah, I feel like. Last year I felt like I was really dialed in, and it was probably around 90%, and we ended up winning 3 tournaments.
So if you're getting 30 bites a day, which is not out of the question, regardless of where you're fishing up north for smallmouth or where you're fishing, losing 2 or 3 a day is going to happen. But if you're, but it's on you if you're losing 8, 9, 10 fish a day. There's something wrong with
100%.
with your setup as far as either how you're fighting the fish, your rod, your line, how you're setting the hook, that type of thing. It's not on the bait then.
100%. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I tweak like a maniac all my equipment all the time. Anybody who watches Day 4 knows it. Rod length, power, action, line size, et cetera. If I'm not putting 90% of the fish in the boat, I'm losing my mind, because there's something amiss.
Yeah. A lost fish isn't just a lost fish. It also messes with your mind during the day. Yeah. So you want to.
You don't say, Dan.
Yeah, you want to really be focused on landing.
Really?
Yeah. So
I've
never let a lost fish derail a Bassmaster Open.
Yeah,
never.
Sure haven't.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, you want.
What's the biggest bass you've caught out of up there?
Me?
Yeah.
7.3 pounds.
Oh, dude.
Like what was your setup on that? Like was that on 6-pound test?
Yeah, that's 5-pound braid to 6-pound test fluoro, and that was a sneaky underspin.
That's phenomenal. My biggest smallmouth is 7-1, and it came on Erie, and I was using 12-pound fluorocarbon and a 3/4 ounce tube head.
Yeah, that's a much different setup.
Oh, exactly. I was snatching the tube.
Nice.
So I got some of the new stuff, and I didn't know anything about this 2.75 hover minnow that was coming out. And I mean, you guys have been on this. Then talk a little bit about the development of this new hover minnow. It's unique, and I also think it's applicable across the country. I actually was out yesterday throwing it in Oklahoma, and it was exactly matching the size of the shad there. But would you say out of the 6 things, this kind of hover minnow is kind of like the flagship release for 2024?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think especially being relevant everywhere. So the story behind that bait is we've been doing this jig and minnow. I mean, it's called mid strolling. We call it Cindy rig. This whole bait started from a problem. We were finding that as the years were going on, they were starting to shy away from the bait a little bit more than usual. So we used to catch, when we first started doing this whole technique, we would catch a lot of these fish that would follow. As a smallmouth, as when I'm talking about smallmouth specifically, I was thinking, how do we generate more bites, whether it's even 1 or 2 more, 3 more in the day, when we can see the fish following and they're not committing. And for me, jerk bait, everyone knows that random darting action of a jerk bait triggers smallmouth, and then also a spiraling fall. So that was like the premise. Like I just felt like we needed a bait that could do that. And then after we figured out that was what we needed to do, we went to work on the design and figuring what the bait profile had to look like. So about a year and a half ago, we went to work on some prototypes. Last year, really kind of dialed in a shape that was doing what we needed to do pretty early in the summer. And then by the fall, we felt like we had it dialed and it was ready to go. And people will think that this bait came out because of the craze and the success of the jig and minnow technique over in the tournament scene in the last year. But this was being developed before that it just happened to align and collide at the same time as this. Completely coincidental. And timing is impeccable for this bait to be released, because everyone's got like a minnow profile bait that they're doing this, but they don't have anything unique like this that provides this kind of action. And this thing just unlocks several new bites that these anglers could really benefit from.
Talk about the bites.
So the first one is that that mid strolling technique, jig and minnow. You can see that there on the screen. If you dart it hard enough, or if you're in deeper water, we call it hover gliding. So sorry, hover darting. That's the name, hover darting. So it darts in random directions. You flick it. Every time you flick it, it's so unpredictable. You don't know what direction it's going to go in. The second one is, if you've got a fish that's following, if you drop it, it's going to spiral down, and that just drives smallmouth nuts, especially in shallow water. You have the ability to get this bait to turn and look at the fish. And that's a secret that not many people know about. But if you can get a bait to turn and stare at the smallmouth, that's like they just get so mad and they instantly hit. And, that's something that we've kind of held back for a long time in terms of the knowledge of that. And this bait allows you to achieve it on slack line. So that's, one of the other baits. And then the other way that you fish this, is with that like moping, hanging a minnow, Damiki fishing. There's so many names for it, but that vertical presentation where you're throwing it over the, you see a fish, you hover it over them, it settles under the boat, and this thing will almost behave like like the old school Rapala jigging raps that we would ice fish with. It darts off to the side, returns to center, spirals down, and paired with our hanging head, it's just a whole different action that they haven't seen. And right now, I feel like it's a race to try to get a look that they haven't seen, because there's so many baits on top of them.
Frank, this is something that I'll use it. You're obsessed with this stuff now.
Yeah, thanks for that. By the way, yeah, I am, and here's the thing, with the hover minnow, Dan, you hit on something like crazy. It's the erratic. This bait hunts all the time, and it does little tiny things that appeals to especially the smallmouth. Like I attribute a smallmouth is like a cat. Okay, you play with the cat with a toy. If you wiggle it a little bit and stop it and wiggle it a little bit, the cat goes, and then when you stop, the cat stops. Then when the cat stops again, you move it, he stops. If you peel it away from him, he runs after it and pounces on it. Or the other thing I noticed is if you throw the toy out there and you just shake it a minute and you don't touch it, you leave it there and just shake it, and it quivers and does one little thing different, they pounce on it. And that's how the smallmouth are, which is insane, because with jerk baits, like when I first started fishing jerk baits for smallmouth, I would do the most erratic 6-foot pools, crazy stuff, and these smallmouth would just go ballistic on the thing. This gives you that ability, that triggering characteristic in a tiny little bait. And yeah, I am obsessed with it. I really am. I literally, you guys are going to hate my guts, but I can't wait to drop this thing in front of some 2-pound crappie, because they will annihilate it.
Yeah, it's a really unique profile. It does some really cool stuff.
Frank has done numerous shows. Dan, I'm sure you remember these, about like matching your equipment to the bait. The Great Lakes Finesse stuff seems like something that's very easy to overpower how it is intended to be fished. And going back to that fishing outside of your comfort zone, I mean, we got a lot of listeners in Oklahoma and Alabama and Florida and Texas, and like, I know it's all the rage on the pro tours, but there's still a big difference between watching someone and getting a 7-foot medium action rod with 6-pound test. I mean, you said 5-pound braid, and I think there are probably a lot of people that were like, yeah, right. But talk about the importance of matching it, and like what kind of range of pound test and tackle most of this stuff is actually designed for to get maximum production out of.
Yeah, I think, as I'm, talking to more and more people, I think, the mindset that someone needs to have is almost like fine wire drop shot hook when they're thinking about the type of line and setup they're going to use, right? You're not going to use a flipping stick with a drop shot. So, yeah, so you need, in my opinion, longer whippier rod. So for me, ideally something in the range of like 7.2 to 8-foot medium light, fast action. That's a good parabolic action, but enough beef in the back end to turn these fish. For me, it's all about maximizing distance. You see these guys now in the Elite Series with the brakes, right? Those brakes on the back of their boat. They're trying to maximize the distance because they know the closer they get to those fish, the odds of them hooking up go down. So that's why we use 5-pound braid. I would suggest no heavier than like 8-pound test braid. And then somewhere in the neighborhood of, if you're not comfortable, try to get comfortable with 6-pound test, but, learn how to do it. 8-pound would probably be the most I would go, unless I'm dragging with our Mini Pro tube head and Juvie Craw. In that case, I would go with a heavier rod and beefier line, up to 10 or 12-pound test line in that case. But for the most part, a really loose drag. These finesse hooks tend to set themselves. You just need to put a bit of pressure on them. And really, that's why they're fine wire and as thin as they are, because we're casting out there with such light line, getting it way out there. And as most of you guys probably know, the biggest fish tend to bite almost in the first few cranks. So when you're way out there and you set the hook with a medium light rod and 5-pound test braid and 6-pound, like you're not getting much on that hook in that hook set, right? So penetration is a big issue. So that fine wire hook solves a lot of those problems. So you really just need to kind of lean into them and also back your drag off. And if you do a good job of, you know, just playing that fish out and not rushing them, you know, you'll be absolutely fine. You know, as long as that fish doesn't jump off in the first jump, you know, most people lose that fish either right at the boat. They're trying to bring that fish in those last few feet and they're putting too much pressure on them, or the fish will, you know, spit it right away. You just got to get good at controlling yourself and being patient.
Yeah, see, that's exactly what I was going to say. Most of the lost fish are the first jump or trying to get them in the boat. Because when you, and everyone's guilty, and me included, when you get a big fish to the side of the boat, all you want to do is get them in the boat. And then you start to do things differently. But if you ever notice when you're fun fishing, you play the fish, you hardly ever lose one when you're fun fishing. But the minute you got something on the line, for some reason, that last 3 feet, it's the death beat. You know what I mean? It's like, holy crap. You know, so I mean, just the light wire hooks. Like, here's another thing, Dan and Matt. I hear everybody go, "Oh, I straighten the hook out. I straighten the hook out." And I'm like, okay, because I've never straightened a hook out, like, and lost a fish because of it. I've opened up the gaps on them sometimes because of the pressure that I'm applying to the fish. But I steelhead fish all the time with the smaller and skinnier hooks than we're using. And you play the fish out, you don't lose them, you don't straighten them out. The fish set the hook themselves half the time. That thin wire goes right into the fish. The minute they bite on it and turn to go, they're already hooked for the most part. As soon as that line tightens up, you got them. I think people run into problems on how they fight them, to be honest with you. That's my thought.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Just too much pressure on them.
Both of you guys are very adept smallmouth anglers and have caught thousands of smallmouth over 4 pounds. How many times over the last 5 years on light line have you broken off a smallmouth that was hooked pure? I'm not talking about like got around a cable or was in a rock or something like that, but just an open water 4-pound smallmouth on 5 to 8 pound test over the last 5 years. I want to get individual answers here. How many times have you broken off a fish?
Ooh, I mean, for me, that only really happens if I'm, you know, practicing or fun fishing and I haven't retied in a while. But
I mean, like a key where everything's dialed in.
No, like broke off just for no reason. Like there's
where you're fighting it and you know you want to catch this fish. You're doing everything you can, and he breaks it.
Zero.
Yeah, I can't.
On 6 pound test.
Zero.
Yeah, I don't remember the last time either. To be honest with you, I don't remember. I fight them calmly. You know what I mean? Now in the beginning of the drop shot days, I broke a lot of fish off, but I know the reason. Remember when I brought the fly tying vise here?
Yep.
And showed you guys on the drop shot hook where the hook eye meets the hook shank. A lot of times your line goes around and gets caught in there, and that's where the issues lie. That's why they're breaking them off. So what I did was I tied a dam of thread over it to prevent the line from getting into that little gap. And then losing a fish was only my own idiocy, putting too much pressure on them right at the side of the boat, fighting them, trying to grab them, and then bink, you know what I mean? And it's my fault. And like Dan said, not retying is the biggest issue.
But I mean, I think that's proof. And I think if you ask any of the serious smallmouth guys, straight breakoffs are 100% angler fault. Not, I've got to use light line on this, so I'm going to break some off. Like, there should be no reason to break it off. Let's go through. I'm interested. So the drop minnow, a lot of people are familiar with, and I don't know if you guys have them there. Maybe I could get like Frank to hold up a hover minnow, and Dan, you can hold up the drop minnow or something like that. But these are the two two different ones. We just watched the video on it, but Dan, kind of walk us through the differences between the drop and the hover.
Yeah, so the drop minnow, is a solid minnow style bait. What really makes that bait special is the neutral buoyancy.
Here, I'll get the drop. I'm gonna get the drop minnow out if I can open the bag.
Yeah,
well,
so
Dan, you have it, Dan. You go.
Yeah, I've got both. So the biggest differences are completely different shape profiles. So the drop, this is the new 3.25 inch drop minnow. It's just a full-bodied minnow, fully round. Has that matte finish, neutral buoyancy, incredible on a drop shot, on a jig head. Really, just from a minnow standpoint, it's just a really good bait option for even an underspin trailer. It's just going to be more of your up-down, especially on a jig head. It's just going to go up and down, up and down. You can wiggle it in place if you're to Demiki rig it. This one, this is the hover minnow. It's got a concave belly. So see if you can see that.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
It's very unique looking. Like when you get it in your hands, you're like, okay, that's cool. Like I first got it. This is bad.
Yeah.
I first got it and I was like, okay, does it go that way?
Yeah.
And I'm like looking at the eye and I'm like, that kind of looks right. And then I literally like turned it over and was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah. So, we wanted that concave belly, right? For this bait specifically to achieve those actions. It's a split tail, so it's a different look than the drop minnow. So this is our little like bulb straight. Oh man.
Yep.
Anyway, this is it's like a fork tail.
Yep.
But really it's just a fatter profile. So the biggest key though that people need to understand with this is that if you were to use a regular ball head or like on a range roller head, this thing is going to flip upside down and sink to the bottom. What you need, and this is part of the engineering, is you actually need a jig head, and we'll talk about this one, that's heavier on the bottom. So in our case, it keels, right? So that keel is critical to get the action out of the bait and to make it land on its belly. So we have two hook options for this thing. It's the sneaky swim bait head, which is our head design with the eye right at the front. Oh man, my thing's not zooming. But anyways, you can see the eye placement.
I'll show the videos after this. So
And then our hanging head, which is for those vertical presentations. So this head is perfectly balanced. So you don't need to manipulate the knot or anything. You just tie it right on there and it's going to sit perfectly level.
You don't have to loop knot it or anything.
Nothing. You don't need to do any manipulating. And if you hook it, like miss a fish, you don't need to bring it up to adjust your knot.
So you're telling me all this little stuff makes that much difference on the smallmouth?
100%. Yeah, 100%.
It's getting a bite or not getting a bite in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got to also keep in mind, right? Like we're getting a lot of bites by nature of the size of these baits, the natural looks and shapes. But, even when we're thinking about the smallest little details in these baits, if we believe that we can adjust the bait to get one more bite in a day, then we're going to make that adjustment, whether it's the quality of the product, like the hook, or the way the bait performs. Because for us, one fish could literally be the difference between winning the tournament or not even cashing a check. So we've always had that commitment internally that if we can make a bait 1% better, we're going to make that switch.
Is this the turn back look where it spins around, turns back?
No, I'll show that, but I'm just showing the head right now on both of those different baits.
Yeah, I think for the hover minnow, if people want to check out the video, we've got a 4-minute video that like really dives into this thing and explains it well. It just shows the profile, how we fish it, how the action is for each of those techniques. I think that would be, obviously really helpful if anyone wants to learn about this bait. And it's just and then the other thing, like I said earlier, like when we're in shallow water, like 5 feet or less, because it's got that spiraling action, if we see a fish that's following the bait when we're just reeling it in or doing that, twitching it mid-strolling technique, we can just dead stick or slack line it, meaning like we just make it drop and it'll spin, land on the bottom on its belly and be staring at the fish and the smallmouth like every time they nose down and just get real mad and eat it.
Yeah,
I noticed that spiral is key, Frank. That's something that you've done for years and years and years on the Great Lakes is a death spiral, right?
100%. I mean, you could do the same thing. You could achieve the same thing with a crankbait and a jerkbait when you're largemouth fishing. Also, like with the crankbait, the DD22 will come off a rock. If you pause it, it wants to go backwards. It rises backwards. So at the pause, you could pause it and twitch your rod tip and go slack again, and the bait will turn. And you could do the same thing with the jerkbait. Like we were largemouth fishing this winter, and I had a bunch that were eating it head first. And my buddy's like, dude, man, they're hitting that thing head first. And I started laughing, and I said, no, because you see, when I pull it down, get it down to depth, and I twitch the rod tip, and then I give it a quick twitch and snap. I said the jerkbait at the pause after the snap will turn, and that fish eats it head first. He's not chasing it from the head. It turned on him, and he ate it head first. So that's a very cool. That is a super cool option that you can do with a soft plastic now. That's crazy good.
All right, here's what I want to do on this. So we've kind of covered like that, the sneaky swim bait head and the hanging head with the drop minnow and the hover minnow. Did I get all that right?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah.
Dude.
Wow,
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Good.
Give me like a little package. Like if I'm going up to the Great Lakes and I want to buy like some packs of each and some weights in general and some covers, just give me a little rundown of I'd pick up a couple of these, a couple of these, a couple of these, and I'm set for 80% of or 90% of what I'm going to encounter this year.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you need some matte black and OG, which is the silver. I don't have it in front of me, but you need some little sneaky underspins. This is one of our new colors, matte green pumpkin. But you need some of those. 3/16 for shallow, and if you're going to be out in deeper water, you need the 5/16 or the 3/8. You need drop minnows for sure. If you're on the St. Lawrence River, you're going to want spicy melon, which is a really cool color. Green pumpkin, matte black, and crushed shad. And then also we've got two new colors that we just launched. In my opinion, should be added to that rotation, which is this is the watermelon pearl and the little smelt color. Those two.
Is that called a laminate?
Laminate, yeah. So
is that what you were all jacked up about, Frank, before we went live on the two tones? Why is that? Because I was like, oh, nice color, but you were like, Dan, I'm so happy that we've got the two tones now, and you're like, what is the deal with that?
Well, there's a couple reasons for it. One of the reasons is clearly live scoping with a jig head. Gives you the ability now to not only chase the smallmouth, but now chase the largemouth that are keying in on shad and alewives or emerald shiners up here where we live, is one of the reasons. The other reason is because sometimes that two-tone for Lake Erie is absolutely a game changer. It just depends. If the fish are keying in on bait, you got to have it. If they're keying in on gobies and crayfish, the solid colors have a tendency to work better, unless you're talking about a solid pearl or a translucent color, because the bass are looking up at it, so they see bait fish profile.
Yep.
The other thing, you know what? We missed something, guys. We missed the finesse jig.
We haven't even gotten there. I got it right.
All right.
I'm trying to get this to where like the smallmouth guys know about this stuff and they're on it, as evident by the Great Lakes Finesse sales. But what I'm trying to do is get, and like we talked about last month, get a lot of guys comfortable with trying stuff that looks way too small, that is outside of their comfort zone. Like you don't have to convince the guys that are doing it to keep doing it because they're catching them on it, right, Dan?
Well, right. And here I'm gonna say this too. If guys that are hesitant about going small, okay, then if you have no aversion to picking up a Ned rig with the little 2-inch, 2.5-inch stick bait on the back of it, this is no different. This is no different in technique. I mean, it's definitely different as a bait, but as a technique, if you're comfortable with the Ned rig, you'd be equally as comfortable fishing this stuff.
Yeah, 100%.
But minnow and jig head wise, I just in the minnow and jig head, just finish out your train of thought on what you would recommend them having. Just a couple of the different jig heads and then the weights to go along with those colors.
Yeah, I mean, that's a loaded question, right? I mean, there's different times of the year. They could be positioned shallow, deep. It really all depends on the time of the year. I mean, if you're out deep, you need some hanging heads, because that hanging a minnow technique is incredible. And this jig head allows you to get away with really light line. We've used as low as 3-pound test line with that jig head and being able to hook them. And
get out of here. How do you fight a fish on 3-pound test line, Dan?
You know what? Ask our buddy Travis Manson about 3-pound tests. He'll tell you.
Wait a second. I talk to Travis all the time, and he's kept that one quiet.
He can't give you everything. You got to keep some things under the collar, dude.
3-pound test.
He's done it as well. Yeah, we've been on the phone talking about it, and we'll be on top of a school of fish, and they're not biting, and that's the adjustment to go down a super light line.
Okay, I have a confession. I have a confession to make right now. The lightest line I've ever used is 4-pound test line. and the confession continues. It's only for ice fishing, but I've landed gargantuan walleyes on it, and you can do it, but I don't cast it out.
It's not our go-to. I mean, we're going to try to get them on 8, 6, 4. 3 is okay. We're desperate. We know these fish are here, and we don't have a choice. And we've got the rods for it, and this jig head, it works with it. I mean, I don't recommend it because you will lose fish, but the alternative is not getting any bites when you need bites. Fair. So, I wouldn't suggest people go out and start trying to learn how to use 3-pound test. I mean, that's from my steelhead days. I've caught 15 to 20-pound steelhead on 3-pound test. I'm comfortable with it, but many people would break off on the hook set because they wouldn't understand.
Many people will break off trying to tie a knot.
Yeah.
Or looking at it wrong.
Yeah. So hanging heads, you need drop minnows. I mean, those are, I mean, there's no bait. I mean, it's been in the last year, over 10 top 10s on the Elite Series and the Opens and the Toyota Series. I mean, it's just a staple. They eat it everywhere you go. You need juvie craws. You absolutely need juvie craws. If you're shallow, you can go as, if you're inexperienced, 1/4 ounce, 3/8 ounce will have you covered for most of the situations you're faced with, unless you're going out in deep water or heavy wind. I mean, those would be, then you can mix in a few other things that, you get excited about. Like the Hellgrammite is the juicy Hellgrammite is unbelievable on a drop shot. You get some of those. There's 2 colors I think would get you by, the matte black and the brown pumpkin special, which is this color here. It's a really natural looking color. It's perfect, it's neutrally buoyant, so it's perfectly level on the drop shot. And then some of our new matte finesse jigs, if you want to give them a different look. These are our new. This is one that I just pulled off my rod before we came on here, and the craw is just like, I don't know if you can see it, but it's just like,
just tore up. Let me see that jig head.
Yeah, so that's
that's this one. So I've got this thing right here, and this is also a new drop. Comes from 16th ounce all the way. What?
No.
8th and 16th, 8th and 3/16. I mean,
yeah, those are the 2 sizes. Yep, it's primarily for shallow.
This is explain what this is, because I had not seen a jig like this before, and I'm struggling to see like I'm not exactly sure where I would employ this.
You'll employ that on your spotted bass fisheries where you live.
Yeah, so Really, so the ball head, we chose the ball head because we feel that the ball head comes through the grass as well as the rock really well. You don't get as much debris like you do on a football head. So football head, you need a lot of like really clean bottom for, and no vegetation. Otherwise it gets hung up a little bit. So we wanted to do it on a ball head, really fine skirt. And then it's built on a Gamakatsu 604. So it's a really small hook, but it's really stout. So you can really hit them hard. Pairs really well with our snack craw, which has become a crazy good jig trailer. So where you're going to throw this is, for us, it's really where we throw like tubes, or we're drop shotting. If we're sight fishing for these fish, we'll pitch it up against a boulder, sometimes around some docks, or for us, we just cast it out, we let it hit the bottom, and then we just hop it along the bottom real slow. That seems to be the most effective way to use them. Very rarely are we like pitching them like you would like for largemouth and stuff. But when it comes to smallmouth, you just drag it along the bottom, hop it like you would, a tube.
Okay.
Yep. Just different look. They love it.
And they like that, just the skirt, the additional thing of the skirt. So it kind of is along that line of the guys who are dragging the jigs with the skirts on it, with the net on it too.
Yeah, exactly. I think when the fish are aggressive, and they're in feed mode, I feel like just a little bit bulkier presentation. You can control the fall a little bit as well. They like that look. So we got 6 good
because
colors.
you don't lose the finesse ability with it.
Yeah, exactly. It's super compact, like really, really small. Like most people, unless they have one in their hands, they'll be like, "Oh, just another jig," but it's really tiny.
It is very tiny. That's why I was like, I'm trying to figure out exactly, but it's interesting. So it's like, you sight cast with this thing a lot too.
Yeah. I think where you'll find it'll benefit you is if you're fishing around largemouth lakes or spotted bass lakes and the fish are pretty pressured. Maybe some people have already gone through that set of docks or laydowns. You throw this in there, I think you'll be shocked at how much they eat a tiny little jig.
Oh yeah.
They just don't see them.
You're a big fan of a compact jig, Frank.
Oh yeah, 100%.
We've done like a whole show on that, I think.
We do. We have. I mean, I like the compact jig, especially if we're gonna say we're gonna talk not about where Dan lives or the Great Lakes area, like Smith Lake, for example, fishing the bluffs down there, phenomenal. Wheeler, I've used a small ball head a long time ago because I realized how good that little tiny, piece of popcorn it basically is to the bass. And I've been fishing that for a long time, and for largemouth and spotted bass. This is great because now it's already done. It's already done. All I got to do is trim the skirt the way I want it, and put the trailer on it, and there's no monkeying around.
All right. Compact wise, and I think this is one of the last ones, and then we'll wrap things up here. I got a question about the plastics, but the kind of along the lines with the tube jig head, like a very compact, small but heavy football head. And that's a new drop this year too.
Yeah. So so everyone's kind of, if they know our brand, they're familiar with the stealth football head. Sorry, the stealth ball head.
Yep.
So we felt like we really need to come out with a football head version. A lot of applications for that. Especially clean bottom rocks just comes through better. And even like we've got one in that 3/8 ounce size, which is incredible for that deep water and accessing the deep water. We find there's not much vegetation, or if any, down when we're fishing 20 feet or more. So the football head really shines in the deeper water, we find.
Yeah, I'm digging that a lot.
That's kind of a big thing that's been going on up north, but I think that's also the small, like open water compact stuff, I think is making its way. I know it's making its way further south in non-traditional ways too. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that. I mean, when I designed this, the team at Pradco down in Arkansas, they're like, "Why doesn't it have a wire guard?" And we're not fishing around brush piles up here. We're just moving around rocks. So that open hook is absolutely fine. And we would buy some with guards, but we just rip them out, in the back in the day.
Yeah.
So
and Frank, you're a big proponent of the football head shape.
Oh yeah, because it rolls over the rocks really well, and because of the wide shape, it doesn't get caught. It doesn't get caught in the thinner cracks like a traditional flipping jig with the pointier nose will get wedged into the cracks. That's the whole purpose of the football jig. Basically, it rolls and wobbles over the rocks really nice, which is why I like the mini tube head too. Because it slides right over them.
All right. So here's my question, Dan. Guys who fish, they talk about, they see a lot of plastics. And you talk about neutral buoyancy a lot. You have some things that I've noticed like keep coming up in it. Also, when you get a pack of these things, from the very first time I ever felt them, I was always like, boy, that's a different feeling plastic than I expected. Like if you're used to any type of smallmouth, super soft, super subtle, easily ripped. This is, I don't even know how to describe this, but it's firm yet naturally moving.
Yep.
Is this a weird type of it's a weird type of plastic, isn't it?
Oh, all of our competitors would love to know what it's made out of.
I'm not wrong on that. Like I haven't felt
no,
this
you're
type
not
of plastic.
wrong.
It's complete.
It's not a Lastec. It's not regular, but it has that. It's got like rigidity in it. When it does split, it actually kind of splits instead. It splits instead of tears. It's neutrally buoyant, and it's firm, but it has remarkably subtle action. Like that's the best way I could describe it.
Wait, Dan, before you explain it. So the first time that I fished it, I fished it on the ball-headed jig, and I threaded it on the hook and put it on the jig head. And I was absolutely amazed at how it stayed on, no glue, no nothing, how it stayed on. And the other thing that amazed me was the durability factor. Because I was like, oh, I'm going to go through 4,000 of these things. And then when I fished it, I'm like, oh my God, what is this stuff?
Yeah. I mean, could you describe a better material for baits? I mean, not only is it durable, and it has that, the characteristics we're looking for to get the actions. But, even, this is a bait that's a really good example, the juvie craw. Yeah. Like the tentacles are so thin and the claws are so thin. Can you imagine if we tried to make this with, some of the plastics that other brands use? It would not be able to eat. This bait wouldn't exist. And, you're able to catch 20 fish on this bait without losing an appendage or a tentacle. Because of the material that we use, but and it's got the action. It's just so, we're obviously not going to give up what we're using. But
so it is like a secret. It is like a deal. I didn't know that. I should have done that in the pre-production meeting on this. I didn't know that. I just was like, what makes it different in it? It's not just a firmer plastic. Like here, I don't know if you could, I'll see if I can show this. But like I've got one right here, and if you do it like see how it like pulls and comes back, but then like when you hold it, like it's a really firm plastic.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But it's got a lot of movement too, which is crazy.
I think I really want to talk about that neutral buoyancy because I've kind of seen some stuff that's coming out, and some brands are really obviously noticing what our brand is doing, and they're starting to claim their stuff is neutrally buoyant, where they got some floating in it. This material is truly neutrally buoyant. Like it doesn't lift. So I'd encourage anyone to, if they get a bait, make sure you throw it in your sink, right? Throw it in your bathtub, see what that bait does on the hook, because you'll be shocked at how some of these baits look. When you actually put them in water. And our stuff, the material we use is just that true neutral buoyant material. And then for the baits that we need some lift, like the snack craw and the juvie craw, because they're bottom baits, we want those claws to lift. We do add some floating into those to get them to lift.
I'm trying to find a good video of this neutral buoyancy so you can explain exactly what
Yeah, I mean, if you go to our website, if you go to the drop minnow, the header, every single one of our pages on our website has a header that has the bait underwater, and that's where we're focused, right? I mean, ultimately that's what the fish are seeing. We're all about trying to get people to catch more fish, and that means the bait has to look really, really good underwater. You know, a lot of brands really focus on what the bait looks like on the shelf, what it looks like on the peg.
I think we used this last time you were on. So that is neutral buoyancy.
Yeah. So what you'll notice with other brands, and I'm starting to see it, they've shifted. They used to say their baits float. Now they're saying that they're neutrally buoyant. But what you'll see is their tail will actually lift. If you just let it sit perfectly still, the bait will actually start to lift. The tail will lift. Ours will stay straight.
That's so cool. I like the way that spicy melon looked in the water with the sun refracting off of it.
Yeah, that's an incredible color.
That color is sweet.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one I was talking about earlier that, you know, you gotta have in your arsenal.
Yes,
clear water.
look at how it shimmers with the light refraction.
That's the one that's the one that looks just green, and then you put it in the water and it glows.
Yeah. Live.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have caught a lot of spotted bass on that. And the spotted bass like that a lot, especially when it's sunny out. Yeah.
So I just do want to I know this might not be the most exciting thing in our lineup. The hover minnow is obviously super exciting, but in the north here, this matte perch color that we introduced, this is my, oh man, I'm really bad at that. I'm like,
no, you're good.
I'm like Matt trying to show diagrams with paper.
Yeah.
That matte perch is one.
It's an unnecessary shot.
Shots fired.
I laugh every time you do that when you're doing a diagram.
Dan, how important, and Frank too, how important, there's top 10 guys in the world who don't give a care if the thing is lead or if it matches. Then we've done some shows where Frank is in there with like 7 paintbrushes matching his Texas rig weight to the color of the worm. I know with this minnow jig head thing, some guys are all about it. Some guys don't care. A lot of the tungsten stuff is shiny. There's some guys who want a black head. You've got a lot of colors that match what, in your opinion, is the actual importance of matching the bait to the color of the head? Or is it another one of those that you've talked about? One key bite here is the difference between that fish coming up and edging off, or coming up and sucking it in.
I mean, one, confidence is everything. I personally, prior to one tournament scenario, wouldn't have been such a proponent of matching and, you know, dialing in the exact color. But I was in a tournament. It was actually a largemouth tournament, probably about 4 years ago. And my tournament partner, we were just flipping plastics, and we were using 1/8 ounce tungsten weights. And I was using green pumpkin. We were throwing a green pumpkin craw, and he left his black weight on in the tournament and had the green pumpkin craw. And I ended up hooking all of the fish. He could not get bit. And that small little difference, as soon as he switched, it was almost instant. After like 3/4 of the day, he hadn't caught a fish. I'd caught like 15. He's like, there's no way it's the weight. And I said, it's the weight. I bet you it's the weight. He switched, no joke, 2 pitches in, he hooked his first fish of the day by switching the green pumpkin. So, I mean, I do believe in having the right color and making minor little adjustments here and there. I would say in most days it probably doesn't matter, but there are some days where it does.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, you know, I'll throw a green pumpkin slip sinker or black all the time. I used to paint every slip sinker to match every color worm I had because I was obsessed with it. I wanted the whole thing to look the same. And what I found is that if you have to have a choice, green pumpkin usually is the least obtrusive color of all of them. So I started using green pumpkin for everything, and I haven't noticed any differential in my bites. There are occasions when I will, like if I'm flipping a June bug lizard or something, I will put a June bug slip sinker on, just because I want that. As I pull it over a log, I want it to look more natural, just more of the same. With the jig heads, if I had to have two colors that I would throw on the jig heads for the minnow style stuff, I would either go OG or green pumpkin, matte green pumpkin.
Yeah.
I think those are the least two obtrusive colors.
So the matte green pumpkin, if anyone doesn't know, we just launched that color as well. So that's in all of our head shapes for the sneaky underspin, hanging head, swim bait head. So yeah, the matte perch
with a gammy, and they all have gammies in them.
Yep.
Okay, so here's the other thing that I want you to talk about, and I know we're obviously talking about the Great Lakes Finesse stuff, but with small baits, the length of the shank and how the bait lays on the hook, I cannot tell you. I've been in so many conversations with high-level tournament anglers who are died, like they will only use one style of head because it is a hook shank that matches the bait that they are throwing. It's really easy to overmatch these baits if you just are like, I've got the jig heads, I'm going to buy the drop minnows, I'm going to buy this stuff. Talk about how much time you spend kind of figuring out from hook eye to the length of the shank and how it impacts the action of the bait.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty important. I'm a big proponent of letting the back end of the bait be as free as possible. You definitely don't want a long hook on a smaller bait because it really impacts the action. So, our sneaky swim bait heads and stuff and our underspins, those are all dialed right into, whatever they pair with, right? So like our, our underspin matches our drop minnow. When you thread that on, it's going to line up perfectly where you want it. And really, maybe I'm not as obsessive on that as other people, but I do know that if you get that hook too close to the back, you're going to really impact the natural action of the bait. So I always try to keep the back of the bait as free as possible.
I agree 1,000% on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you also don't want it too far. You also don't want it too far forward where you're missing bites, right? There's a fine balance there. If they're short striking, you still want a hook that's reasonably close to the back of the bait too. So that's probably something where you're in like that top 0.001% of anglers where you're that dialed in terms of millimeters. But where we've positioned these hooks, our stuff matches, the terminal matches the plastics perfectly. For example, this here is the football head. That's for deeper applications. You can see where the hook comes out. It comes out right on the nose. That was intentional. We want it to be right at the nose. And really, even how that comes out, we kind of, I don't know how many fish were fooling into believing this, but I like to think that hook looks like a tentacle on the cross. So that's why we wanted to come out of the nose.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
But I agree with that. I'm very conscientious of the length of all the hook shanks because I don't like, no matter what I'm doing, I want the plastic to move, and anything that hinders the movement on the plastic, to me, the hook shanks are too long. And so that's kind of what I look for. That's why I like the stealth football head, the stealth ball head, because when I'm downsizing or creating something compact, I know I'm going to get the maximum movement out of the soft plastic that I put on it.
Awesome. Did I leave anything out did we leave anything out on the baits? This is like the goal, and I think we did a good job of it, was an informative to let everyone know what was new, what was coming out with GLF this year, but also to kind of dive into each bait and the reasoning behind it, which I think you guys did a good job of that.
Yeah, I want Dan to explain one thing, because if you walk by the packages and you look at the packages on the shelf and they're just sitting there, okay, you're gonna see the sneaky swim bait head and then the hanging head, and you're gonna be like, oh, they look the same, and you're gonna grab one. But Dan, you need to explain to them the difference between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. These two heads look completely the same, but you'll notice where the line tie eye is. They're completely they're in different spots. So the sneaky swim bait head, that's for your more horizontal casting presentation. So small swim bait, the Cindy rig, which is casting it out, reeling it in. The eye positioning of that is right at the front, so it does a few different things. It keeps the bait more level as it's coming through the water. If you're using a swim bait head that has an eye that's further back, it's actually going to swim nose down a little bit. It kind of digs in, which I don't know why people haven't figured that out, but we've kind of dialed that in. So really just more your horizontal casting presentations. The hanging head, this is really critical. This thing is perfectly balanced. So you'll notice the eye is further back on the head. We figured out the perfect spot where you could tie just a regular knot, and that jig head will sit perfectly level when held vertically. So like this is for your deeper water, your Demiki rigging, hanging a minnow, moping. I mean, there's 1,000 names for it, it seems these days, but that's what this one's for. So yeah, it's really important to pay attention to which head design you're grabbing, because you don't want to be, I mean, they're both going to work, but if you really want to get the most out of the bait and the technique that you're doing, you're going to want the right head. So that's the main difference. Is one's for casting horizontally, reeling, one's for jigging more vertically.
Perfect.
It's cool to see all the little details that go into everything and how much. I mean, you look at it and you're like, I just shrunk everything down and they came out with some jig heads, but it's cool to see all the little
intricacies,
nuances and intricacies and why it is what it is.
Yeah. It's I'm getting a lot of enjoyment out of it, not just from, obviously the success of the brand has been great, and we're very thankful for that, but just the amount of messages we get from people who are like, man, I could not catch smallmouth before you guys. And we get, and this is like me being completely honest, like it's got to be on average 3 people message us a day saying they got a PB on one of our baits. Like they're so excited. They want to share with us. And, that's what it's all about for me is, that's where I get my enjoyment these days, more so than even winning a tournament, is just being able to share this stuff with people and seeing them have success.
I mean, it's a true kind of garage bait niche company to like the big time. I mean, this is a true, this is a great
American story.
Well, but you're in Canada, Dan. So I can say that. So
all right. So
it's
Canadian
international story, but right? I mean, like how long ago was it when you were trying to get people to use GLF stuff where you were like, no, seriously, like delete this stuff, and now you can't even keep it in stock, right?
Yeah, I mean, my kids are 3 years old, and we had just started the brand when they were born, so it's been crazy growth but yeah,
3 years.
So here's the thing. I mean, Matt, you're down in Oklahoma. Like most people down there would be like, I don't know about this small stuff, but up here, the best anglers gravitated to it immediately. So as soon as they saw it, as soon as I was sharing it on my social media posts and stuff, it just kind of like, it really blew up pretty fast. Like it wasn't long before we could not make it fast enough. The word spread fast. Yeah.
Yeah. It was almost like that best kept secret. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the guys in the know were in the know. And
yeah.
And then all of a sudden the cat's out of the bag. It's pretty
cool.
Frank, the last 5 years, is this the most rapid development in smallmouth tactics, bait techniques that you've ever seen in your decades of fishing for smallmouth? Just as what's available, how fast it is, how much attention to detail people are paying to everything just across the board with smallmouth baits?
Yeah, I would say bar none. I don't even think, to be honest with you, I don't even think drop shotting made that much of a fuss. I think drop shotting kind of meandered its way in to the bass world because you could catch largemouth, spotted bass, smallmouth, et cetera, but drop shotting was kind of always mainstream, if you will. This is something that came, I don't want to say out of left field, but it came at the perfect time. Like if you talk about timing, it came at the perfect time where the knowledge base that anglers have today is so great, and it's so easy to obtain the knowledge because of, well, this social media, that there are no secrets anymore. And if you think about it, Dan, you said my kids are 3 years old and we started this, and 3 years old in building a business. 3 years is a microcosm. I mean, you guys are going this way. You're not going this way. You're going this way. So I would say, it's probably in the smallmouth game, it's probably as impactful as forward-facing sonar, in my opinion.
I would put GLF. So I haven't been in it as long as you, Frank, but I would put the rise of Great Lakes Finesse and the necessity to have it in boats up north with the 3-inch gulp minnow and 3-inch black gulp leech when that first came out.
Oh yeah. Thanks for reminding me about that. Yeah.
That's serious. Like when I was I was, covering the Elite Series, and at every event, and it didn't matter who it was, they didn't even know what the hell to do with it. But guys needed that stuff in the boat. Like that was like literally like crack.
Yeah.
And
100%.
I think this is kind of the next biggest development since the gulp leech.
I would agree. That's probably a better comparison than mine was. But
no, it's a good comparison.
But 100%. I remember back in the day, if you didn't have those, you weren't catching them.
And now everyone has it. I mean, heck, you've got Luke Palmer from Oklahoma catching them up north every time he goes, and that dude's from Colgate. You ever drive through Colgate? You're not using a mini pro tube head in Lake Colgate. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, Luke Palmer, that's someone who completely embraced Great Lakes Finesse. And I don't know. I think you'd have to go back and look at those 3 events last year, St. Clair, Champlain, and St. Lawrence. And if you look at those results, I would bet he probably had the most consistent northern swing last year throwing that drop minnow and this GLF stuff. I really can't think of anyone who was that consistently crushing them.
And it's pretty cool to see that, actually. Dude from Oklahoma, big line, big power fisherman, comes out, and
he went 2nd on St. Clair, 13th on Champlain, and 11th on the St. Lawrence River.
Yeah, and prior to those events, he said he'd never made a cut on the northern swing.
Like, how much education for the pro staff do you have to put into it? Like, did Luke call? It's like, the hell do I do with this stuff?
No. If anyone doesn't really know,
that's a valid question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
No. So, Luke.
You mean it in a bad way.
So I met with Jason Stetson and Luke, and literally, you gotta be really careful, right? Because there's the no information rule, so you can't give them specific scenarios. All you can do is kind of just say, here's the lineup, this is how we use everything, kind of like what we're doing here. And it was a 1-hour meeting prior to that northern swing, and it was just a rundown of every bait and the types of scenarios that you can be successful with the bait. But you got to be really careful about sharing information specific to, you just don't want to get them DQ'd or anything, right? So
100%.
Very little. I mean, he did all of his research, I think, with his, like, looking at our public stuff. It killed me to not be able to, tell these guys more, right? But it is what it is. The rules are the rules, and I respect those, and those guys play by the rules.
Well, and the thing too is that, as a professional angler, for the most part, you're not an idiot. You could look at something. You could go
for
watch.
The most part.
I said I qualified.
I know. I was just reaffirming that qualification.
It was a qualifier, and you could look at it and you go, okay, finesse, blah blah blah. You got your videos, that your YouTube videos, Dan, are very informative. Like literally, you could literally just go watch those 3-minute videos on each of the baits, and you know all you need to know. And then it's going to be your ability to actually find fish and interpret what you're seeing. And you could have success with it.
Yeah.
So
and I think that was the reason Luke had so much success, is because he had nothing to lose. He had no bias from the north. He hadn't had much success prior to getting his, being part of the Great Lakes Finesse team. And so he just embraced everything about it and just soaked it up like a sponge, and then just went north and applied it.
I have a couple ideas that should probably be best shared off air, but I like to talk about stuff on there. So here's my two thought processes of this. So we talked about how this GLF stuff and how you developed it, but we've also talked about how it's being used a lot in non-traditional markets, spotted bass, largemouth, and stuff. I want to run a day 4 contest for the next month, where people can send in little video clips or pictures of how they're using GLF products in a non-traditional manner to catch largemouth, spotted bass, other stuff like that all around the country, from California down to Florida. And then we'll bring you in on it, and then the winner we'll shoot him a GLF prize pack.
Yeah, 100%. I'm in.
How's that sound? You like that idea, Frank?
I love that idea. I love that idea, because we're going to see all kinds of fish species now.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a video, but definitely at least a picture. I just don't want you guys going, well, I'm punching hydrilla with it. Like we got to see that it's actually
right. Exactly.
That it's actually happening. But I mean, because I've talked to guys who are using all this stuff and be like, man, you wouldn't believe it. Parachuting bluffs on Ozark lakes, deep timber for, spotted bass, a lot of stuff from last fall where you were trying to match the hatch with like small micro bait fish on offshore largemouth, stuff like that. So
wait till the trout fishermen start throwing the drop minnow.
Yeah, I mean it could be crappie, trout, whatever you're doing it with. So like I said, this show drops on the 11th. You guys have until August 11th to get it in. Matt@basszone.com, either a video, a picture, little description of how you're using the GLF stuff, and then we'll get with Frank and Dan, make a list of it, just kind of like we did with the old pumpkin carving contest, right, Frank?
Exactly.
And then I already told the story on how I got double the stuff, so we can even take it out of my personal stash there and shoot it off to the to a BTL listener.
Yeah, well, I can throw some stuff in there too. But yeah, okay. I mean, yeah, it shouldn't be too hard. I mean, a lot of anglers down south for these other species like spotted bass, largemouth, they're using our stuff like crazy. I mean, Luke at Toledo Bend on the Elite Series got a top 10 with that drop minnow. I think he caught 9-pounder there with it, and that was like one of the big fish of the day that day. So yeah, it's starting to get around.
You probably didn't think that 3 years ago that it'd be catching almost double digits in Louisiana, did you?
So awesome.
No, I didn't think it had not this fast, but I knew it was coming. I think this hover minnow though is going to surprise a lot of people.
I can agree with that on that bait right there. I agree with that. My head's going a mile a minute on that bait.
You can't enter your own contest, Frank.
I'm not entering it, but I will indulge, you might say.
And then when we when we do it, I would like Dan to come back on, and I'd like a 30-second clip of him fighting a smallmouth on 3-pound test that we can also show.
Yeah, that's when you're fishing with your buddy who smokes like a dart a minute, and he goes, "I'll net him for you, Dano," and he's got some big long ash hanging out of his mouth in your line.
I can just picture Travis out there going, "Bring him up, Broheem. Come on, bro.
Yeah.
Bring him up. Just get him up here, bro."
Yeah, he broke off a few. He's a much more aggressive angler than I am.
When he breaks them off, he does the tag end like that.
Yeah,
like he goes, "Are you kidding me?" He likes doing that where you get the bull whip with the tag end that you broke off.
Yeah,
that's a vintage Travis move.
That doesn't hurt your line at all either.
Fishes with shorts and rain boots on. Like that's his go-to.
Yeah, knee pads. Knee pads. We go look at his videos.
Oh yeah.
He's got a knee pad one.
Yeah.
I saw the videos where he's wearing those rubber boots. I'm like,
Yeah.
what the hell is this dude doing, man?
Yeah. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Dan, we're going to let you go and then we'll wrap up the show. Thank you very much for jumping on. And congratulations. And check out GreatLakesFinesse.com, LureNet.com, the YouTube channels for both of those for in-depth ways on how to use it. And then all of the new products are available currently.
Yeah, and don't forget BTL24, guys.
Capital BTL24 on LureNet, additional 50% off all regularly priced items.
Yeah,
thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It was a real pleasure.
All right, see you
guys. Yep.
Adios, bud.
What's our record for like longest show, Frank?
Have
we done a 2-hour show before?
You and I came close one time.
Yeah, we're not going to do that this time, but
no, we're not.
Dude, Dan's such a mellow guy, but he's one of those dudes who just, that there's a reason for everything he does. He knows his stuff, and it all makes a lot of sense after he explains it.
Yeah, I talk with Dan a lot, and he is very serious. He's a very serious guy, and it's very funny because I start telling stories, and I don't think he has time for it. I like to talk about the adventure. You know what I mean? And
thankfully, because that kind of makes the show
right. And I just don't think he has time for it. It's not a slam on Dano because he's a great dude, man. But he is very intense,
mellow.
Yeah, he's right to the point. I don't have time for all this.
I would love to have been in the boat and seen that 33-pound bag of smallmouth.
Oh, dude, that's a giant freaking bag of smallmouth. That's a
and
giant
I think
bag of bass, dude.
Is he still backstage? I think it should have been more. I think they had like a little mishap on like a freak show that pulled off like while they were trying to net it or something. Maybe it got caught up in the net or something like that, like a 7 or an 8 that would have called like a low sit. Wait, he's still back here.
Pull him in.
Is that correct? Didn't you hook like an 8 or a 9 pounder, Dan, in that tournament or something something weird happened and it ended up not coming in?
Yeah. We felt like it was probably like an 8 plus, 8.5.
Oh my
maybe.
God.
Who knows? We don't know. But yeah, it just pulled off. And I don't mind your stories, Frank. They're not that bad.
I wasn't slamming on you, bro.
Did you have all 6s? Would that have given you 35?
Yeah, we had all 6s. They're all 6 plus every fish. Yeah, we had a 7-1. So yeah, we would have called. It would have been another 1.5 pounds or so.
Been a 35-pound sack.
Yeah, we felt like we had the record, and what's crazy is the our bag is actually bigger than the Canadian record. I think by like 2 pounds, but and we fished some Canadian water as well. So I mean, had it been out of Canada, we would have the Canadian record. All around Canadian record.
Did you know this was going to go down? Like, did you know it was a possibility for a freak show?
No, not 32.5, but we thought 30. Like our goal was 30. Like we felt like we were on 30 pounds. Yeah.
What's the max? Like what will it, like, what is there a possibility to do? You had 35 off. There's no way you could ever do a 40-pound bag in a derb, right? There hasn't been 5 8-pounders caught in a single season, has there?
I mean, I've only caught like 2 fish over 3 fish over 7 in my life. So yeah. I mean, that would be a huge.
Good Lord, you would have had almost a 7-pound average.
Yeah, it was like a 6.4 average I think we had in that tournament, and I mean, which is obscene, right? And we didn't even. We took it for granted. It's funny because when we went to weigh in, we tried to put them all in one bag, and we needed to go get another bag, so we brought them up with 2 bags. Kind of embarrassing.
Didn't Travis get second in that with like 28 or 29?
Yeah, he had like 28. Yeah, he had like 28 pounds or something.
Oh, he's probably going, yeah, dude, we got this, bro. We got it, man.
He's dancing in his rubber boots. How many fish over? Like I've only caught 4 over 6 in my lifetime, Frank.
That's still a big smallmouth, dude.
A 6 is a monster, like a monster.
They get knot-headed. They don't even look.
One of them doesn't count, though. I mean, it does count. But I was out with Travis and we were perch fishing, and he was like, hey, you want to catch a giant smallmouth, bro? And I was like, don't tempt me with a good time. And he was next to one of his, he was a quarter mile away from one of his magic rocks. And, I brought a couple perch rods. This was a couple years ago. Like, we literally just perch fishing. He pulls it out in a drop shot and he says, cast right there. And I said, where? He goes, 48 feet in front. And I cast there. And what's going on, Dan? Are we getting like a air attack here?
Yeah, my wife decided she's going to go and
cut the grass.
Oh, no, it's all good.
No, she's gone now. She's up.
So I cast, didn't even hit the bottom, and it was a 6.4. I literally made one cast. It dropped 18 feet. I reeled in a 6.4. We took a picture. We put the rods back up and went back and perch fishing. But on my own, I've caught 3 over 6.
Well, nice. You caught that one. That counts. You caught it.
I know, but I like where I'm like.
That's like saying if you sight fish one, it's not right because you saw it.
Nah, that's not true. It does count. It 100% counts. But I'm more proud of the ones that I
caught on your own.
Yeah, like I caught a 6.6 on the last cast of the Open.
Oh, dude, that's the best. That's a good way to end it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I would have been more excited if my co-angler didn't have 3 for 16 behind me.
Oh.
But that was before. I mean, like that was before I'd learned all the tricks. And he was from there. I mean, I was like, I don't know why this guy's drop shot with such a heavy weight.
Well, that's gonna
after
happen.
His 4th 5-pounder. He let me know why he was drop shot with such a heavy weight and why he was no longer going to do that. So I would have a chance to catch one. I was like, that's awful nice of you. He's a good dude. I fished with him the last time we were up there. What's your PB smallmouth out of Erie, Frank? Now they're not
7-1.
Yeah, which is giant, but Erie and St. Lawrence right now are 2 drastically different fisheries.
Very different fisheries. Very, very different. The day I got the 7-1, I had a 6.15 and I had 3 5-pounders with them. That's the biggest
7.16. So there's 14. That's a third. Is that a 30-pound limit? 29 something?
29 and change. That's the biggest smallmouth limit I ever caught in my life.
That's freaking insane.
It was no derby. It was nothing. I was doing an event for a sponsor. We had a small, there were 2 boats, 4 guys. We had a small bet on who would bring in the biggest smallmouth, just the one biggest one. And the guy that the other pro that was taking 2 other guys out, I knew he was going to keep 5. And so I told my guys, I said, we're going to keep our 5 best because I know this dude's bringing 5 in. And I said, no matter what they pull out of their live well, you act like they're the biggest bass you've ever seen in your life. And so they were like, and he had a good bag. I mean, he wasn't a joke bag. He had a good bag. And they were just like, oh my gosh. And they go, all right, Scalish, pull your fish out. So I pull one of the 5-pounders out and they're like, oh man. And we already beat him. Okay. We already beat him with the one. I go, I said, that's the wrong one. And I threw it in the lake and I go, I pull out another one. I go, that's the wrong one too. And I went through the 3 5-pounders like that. And then I pull out the 6.15 and the 7-1 at the same time. And I go like that. And they're like, oh my God. You know what I mean? It was just one of those deals, man. It was just, I just found a pile of good ones, man, and it was just one of those deals. And I've been to that spot a bunch of times and have never been able to duplicate it there. Never.
What do you think the biggest smallmouth swimming in Erie is right now? I know there was that. What was there a 10 a couple years ago?
Last year.
Yeah, last year. What do you think the biggest? Like if you just your gut and Lake Erie, kind of around that neck of the woods. What do you think the biggest smallmouth is that's swimming around?
It's really hard to say. With a 10-pounder caught, I remember who was it?
Van Dam's
KVD's
brother, Randy. Wasn't it Randy?
Yeah, was it
9-pounder?
9-pounder, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, that's a 9-pounder!" And now you catch a 10-pounder. Yeah. Who knows? I mean, they didn't even know up until recently, and when I say recently, I'm talking about probably the last 20 years, they didn't even know a smallmouth bass live as long as they do. When you stop to consider that a 5-pounder in Erie is 15 years old.
Wow.
So who knows? I mean, who knows?
What do you think the biggest bass swimming in Ontario and the St. Lawrence River is, Dan? Like the biggest. Like what is the King Kong?
I mean, there's no doubt there's tens, guaranteed. Guaranteed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You guys catch way too many 6-pounders and 7-pounders not to have a 10.
Yeah, I mean, the one that we lost, I mean, who knows how big it was.
Did you see it?
Oh yeah, I was staring right at it. It was shallow water. We knew exactly what we were looking at. Yep.
Oh my God. I'd be vibrating, dude.
Did you know in practice, like, was that one of the ones you were going to go back and catch, or was that like one where you guys were fishing and just went, oh my gosh, look at the grouper?
We knew that it was using that area. We'd seen it in practice, and then we went back and it was there.
First cast?
So I think it was like second or third cast, but yeah, it was unbelievable. It just swam away like a freight train. I never seen. Normally, like you hook them and they kind of like start, doing that whole head shake thing, right? Like this thing, it just behaves so different. It just was like a freight train, just in one direction, gone.
Like, did it always hooked, or did it just decide to swim off and just didn't care that it was hooked?
Oh, it knew it was hooked, but it just took off so fast. It was like faster than I could even react. It was insane.
Wow.
It behaved so different. Yeah, it was like I'd never really hooked one like that before. It just behaved so different. It was first fish of the day, and
oh no.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then we broke one off on a boulder. It like just swam beside the boulder, just broke the line. And then the next fish, that day was crazy. It was a horrible start. We had a fish on a bed. We went and got that fish as Matt was trying to scoop it. He was all wound up from losing those other 2 fish that he scooped too hard, broke the net. So the net snapped. So we had to handball that one in. Then I managed while I was landing that fish to grab the piece, like the net. I grabbed it, and so as we were going to the next spot, I just grabbed all the zip ties that he had in his boat. I zip tied it together. It looked like a porcupine. I didn't even cut the ends off because I didn't want the line to
sharp edges.
Yeah, so I just left it look like a porcupine, and then we netted 32.5 pounds with it for the rest of the day.
Do you think that fish is in the same area this year?
Who knows? Who knows? You're asking me biology questions. I'm not a.
Yeah, but I mean, you've got to have it in your head. Like we're gonna go poke around that area and see if we see anything.
Oh yeah, that's a spot we're always gonna check. Like we've checked it many times in the past, and this is the first time that fish had been there. And
oh, really? So it just showed up.
Oh yeah. Like it's a big fish spot, kind of like Travis's little boulder, right? That he's got.
Yeah. That's wild.
So
just to think those freak shows are just swimming out there, and if you just like intersect them at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, this fish was significantly bigger than the 7 that I landed that day.
So oh my gosh. And I know how much bigger they actually are than when you see them in the water. So it could have, who knows what the hell it was.
We don't know. I mean, I'm not going to speculate, but
I mean, I'm not trying to like rub it in. It's a hell of a story Frank was just saying that you're not big on stories. I think that's a hell of a story, Frank.
No, I didn't say big on stories. I said big on when I'm telling a story. He's always busy, You always got somewhere to go, man. It's like I feel bad.
Yeah, it's just there's only so much time in the day, and we got so much going on right now. It's insane. But
well, we'll let you go for the second time then. I'm glad we brought you back in, though. That was a heck of a story. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'll see you, man.
See you.
He's such a
dude. Like, I didn't mean to make it. I realized like halfway through that we're probably making him relive something that he doesn't want to relive.
Are you kidding me, man? I mean, as bad as awful as it was in that moment, it was still the most epic day on earth. Are you kidding?
You can't forget that. Like, I guess that's true. Like in hindsight. So like I was just retelling, I went over to Juice, my buddy Juice, is making some baits, and I was over at his house last night after I got off the water, and Michael Strauns, owns Lucky Lure Tackle, was over there too. Anyway, I got on the story of telling how I lost the biggest bass I've ever hooked in my life after it jumped twice in that open on Rayburn. And, I turned it into a 10-minute story. And even though it's like the lowest point I've ever had in tournament fishing, by the end, I was like, that turned out to be a pretty good story. Like, it's keeps you coming back. It's when you hook those giants, it's what makes you go, it's the uncertainty of, am I going to do, is this going to have, like, are we going to land it? Are you not going to land it? It's what makes you alive, and the heart pump and the sweaty palms and the weak knees when you hook something like that, because it is unknown as to what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes.
Dude, that's how true addictions start. It's that unknown, that unknown, the reward that is not consistent.
Yeah.
That's why fishing is such a great sport, because every time you catch one, every time you hook one, it's different.
It is. All right, 1 hour and 50 minutes. One of the top 3 longest shows.
It was worth it.
It was totally worth it.
Well, you're going on a run, so I'm going to wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Frank. That's awesome.
You're going on
we got shows
run.
coming up.
Yeah, you're
3
going
Lakes, St. Clair, Thousand Islands, Champlain, back to back weeks.
Yeah,
I'm just hoping to catch 1 smallmouth during that trip. Any of those 3, I'll just as long as I can catch a smallmouth, it'll be successful.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, you're gonna do just fine.
All right, this has been another edition of Day 4 with the man Frank Scalish, special guest Dan Miguel with Great Lakes Finesse. We'll talk to everybody next week. See ya.
Adios.